The wind howled across the frozen mountains of northern Alaska like an angry beast, carrying with it the promise of death for anyone caught unprepared in its path. December 22nd had arrived with a vengeance, bringing temperatures that plummeted to 40 degrees below zero. The kind of cold that could kill a person in minutes if they weren't properly equipped. Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane adjusted his scope one more time, his breath forming small clouds of vapor that instantly froze in the bitter air. He had been lying in his sniper's nest for 6 hours now, watching the valley below through his high-powered rifle scope. His mission was simple but critical: provide overwatch for a Navy SEAL reconnaissance team operating in the area. The SEAL team, call sign Bravo 6, had been inserted 3 days ago to investigate reports of illegal weapons trafficking near the Canadian border. What should have been a routine surveillance mission had turned into something much more complicated when a massive winter storm moved in faster than anyone had predicted. Marcus shifted slightly, feeling the bite of cold through his insulated gear. Even with the best cold weather equipment the military could provide, the Alaskan wilderness tested every limit of human endurance. His sniper rifle, a custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum, lay steady on its bipod, the barrel wrapped in white camouflage tape to blend with the snow-covered landscape. Through his scope, Marcus could see the abandoned mining camp where Bravo 6 had taken shelter. The old wooden buildings looked ready to collapse under the weight of accumulated snow, but they provided the only protection for miles in any direction. Radio communication with the team had been sporadic at best, hampered by the storm and the mountainous terrain. Marcus had earned his position as one of the Navy's most skilled snipers through years of dedicated training and combat experience. At 32 years old, he had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq, where his precision shooting had saved countless lives. His record included confirmed kills at distances exceeding 1,200 yards, shots that required not just marksmanship, but an understanding of wind, temperature, humidity, and a dozen other variables. But this mission in Alaska presented challenges unlike anything he had faced in the deserts of the Middle East. The extreme cold affected everything from his equipment to his body's ability to function. His rifle had to be carefully maintained to prevent ice buildup in the barrel and action. His scope could fog or freeze if not properly protected. Even his ammunition performed differently in the extreme cold, with bullet trajectories changing as the powder burned at different rates. The mining camp below had been abandoned for over 20 years, a relic from Alaska's gold rush era that had been left to the elements when the ore ran out. The main building was a 2-story structure that had probably served as both office and living quarters for the mining operation. Several smaller outbuildings surrounded it, including what looked like equipment storage sheds and a generator building. Marcus knew that somewhere in that camp, 4 Navy SEALs were waiting for extraction. The team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, was a veteran of special operations with over 15 years of experience. His team included Petty Officer First Class Tom Rodriguez, an explosives expert, Petty Officer Second Class Mike Chun, a communications specialist, and Petty Officer Third Class Danny Walsh, the team's medic. The plan had been straightforward. Insert the team by helicopter, conduct surveillance for 72 hours, then extract them from a landing zone 5 miles north of the mining camp. But Mother Nature had other plans. The storm that moved in was unlike anything the weather forecasters had predicted, bringing with it winds exceeding 60 miles per hour and snow that fell so heavily visibility dropped to just a few yards. The extraction helicopter had been forced to turn back twice, unable to penetrate the storm. Radio contact with the SEAL team had been lost completely 12 hours ago, just as the worst of the storm was moving through the area. Marcus was their only link to the outside world now, their guardian angel watching from the mountainside. Through his scope, Marcus studied the camp buildings methodically. The snow was piling up against the walls, in some places reaching nearly to the windows. The wind was creating drifts that changed the landscape by the hour. Any tracks or signs of human presence would be erased within minutes of being made. Marcus had chosen his position carefully, selecting a rocky outcropping on the mountainside that provided both a clear view of the camp and natural protection from the wind. He had constructed a small shelter using his poncho and some pine branches, creating just enough space to operate his rifle while staying concealed from any potential threats in the area. The intelligence reports had indicated that the weapons trafficking operation involved at least a dozen individuals, possibly more. They were using the remote location to store and transfer illegal firearms, taking advantage of the area's isolation and the minimal law enforcement presence. The SEAL team's mission was to gather photographic evidence and identify the key players in the operation. But the storm had changed everything. Now it wasn't about gathering intelligence anymore. It was about survival. Marcus checked his watch. The storm had been raging for over 18 hours now, and the weather reports he had received before losing radio contact suggested it would continue for at least another 12 hours. The temperature was continuing to drop, and the wind showed no signs of lessening. He knew that even with their training and equipment, the SEAL team would be facing serious challenges. Hypothermia was a constant threat in these conditions, even for experienced operators. Their shelter in the abandoned buildings would provide some protection, but those old structures were far from weatherproof. They would need to find ways to stay warm without creating too much smoke or light that might give away their position. Marcus shifted his position again, working to maintain circulation in his extremities. Despite his insulated boots and gloves, he could feel the cold trying to work its way into his body. He had learned in sniper school that cold was one of a marksman's greatest enemies, affecting not just comfort, but accuracy. Cold muscles moved differently, cold metal contracted and changed the point of impact, and cold air density affected bullet flight. Through his scope, Marcus noticed something different about one of the buildings. A slight discoloration in the snow near what appeared to be a ventilation opening. It was subtle, barely visible even through his high-powered optics, but it suggested that someone might be generating heat inside the structure. He made a mental note of the observation and continued his systematic scan of the area. Professional snipers were trained to notice the smallest details, the tiny anomalies that might reveal important information. A bent branch here, a disturbed patch of snow there, the way shadows fell differently in one area than another. The abandoned mining equipment scattered around the camp created additional challenges for observation. Rusted machinery, half buried in snow, created confusing shapes and shadows that could hide human movement. Marcus had to constantly verify what he was seeing, distinguishing between natural phenomena and potential threats. As the hours passed, Marcus found himself thinking about the families of the men he was watching over. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had mentioned his wife and 2 young children during the mission briefing. Petty Officer Rodriguez was engaged to be married in the spring. These weren't just fellow warriors he was protecting. They were fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands who needed to make it home for Christmas. The thought of Christmas reminded Marcus of his own family back in California. His sister Sarah would be preparing for the family gathering, probably worrying about whether he would be able to make it home in time. She never really understood what he did for a living, only that it was dangerous and took him away from family celebrations more often than not. Marcus had joined the Navy 12 years ago, straight out of high school in a small farming town in Iowa. His father had served in Vietnam, and his grandfather had fought in World War II. Military service was a family tradition, a way of giving back to the country that had given them so much opportunity. Sniper training had come naturally to Marcus. He had grown up hunting with his father and grandfather, learning patience, precision, and respect for the power of a well-placed shot. The military had refined those skills, teaching him not just marksmanship, but fieldcraft, camouflage, observation techniques, and the mental discipline required for long-duration missions. But nothing in his training had fully prepared him for the isolation and responsibility of this mission. Knowing that 4 lives depended on his vigilance was a weight that pressed down on him almost as heavily as the cold. He couldn't afford to miss anything, couldn't allow fatigue or discomfort to compromise his effectiveness. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the Alaskan wilderness, revealing a landscape transformed by the night's continuing storm. Snow had fallen steadily throughout the dark hours, adding another 2 feet to the already dangerous accumulation. The wind had finally begun to subside, though it still gusted occasionally with enough force to create whirlwinds of powder snow that danced across the frozen terrain. Marcus Kane stretched carefully within the confines of his makeshift shelter, working to restore circulation to muscles that had grown stiff during the long night watch. His body ached from maintaining the same prone position for hours, but his training had taught him to push through discomfort when lives were at stake. Through his rifle scope, he methodically scanned the mining camp below, looking for any changes that might have occurred during the night. The buildings looked even more buried now, with snow drifts reaching halfway up some of the first-floor windows. The main structure, where Marcus believed the SEAL team had taken shelter, showed no obvious signs of activity. No smoke from makeshift chimneys, no disturbance in the snow around the entrances, no movement visible through the windows. But Marcus knew better than to assume the worst. Navy SEALs were among the most highly trained survival experts in the world, capable of enduring conditions that would kill ordinary soldiers. They would know how to stay warm without revealing their position, how to melt snow for drinking water without creating telltale steam, and how to ration their supplies to survive longer than expected. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was the kind of leader who inspired confidence in both his men and the support personnel assigned to watch over them. Marcus had reviewed Morrison's service record during the mission briefing and had been impressed by the man's credentials. Combat tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia, with numerous decorations for valor and leadership under fire. The kind of officer who led from the front and never asked his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Petty Officer First Class Tom Rodriguez brought 15 years of explosive ordnance experience to the team, along with the kind of technical expertise that made him invaluable in complex operations. His ability to improvise solutions with limited resources had saved lives on multiple occasions, earning him the respect of everyone who had served with him. Petty Officer Second Class Mike Chen was more than just a communications specialist. His electronics background had made him the team's go-to person for anything involving surveillance equipment, radio intercepts, or technical intelligence gathering. In a mission focused on documenting weapons trafficking, his skills were essential for capturing the evidence needed to build a legal case. Petty Officer Third Class Danny Walsh might have been the newest member of the team, but his medical training made him one of the most important. In the harsh conditions of the Alaskan wilderness, his ability to treat injuries, monitor the team's health, and recognize the early signs of hypothermia or frostbite could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophe. Marcus checked his watch and realized it had been over 20 hours since the last radio contact with the SEAL team. In normal circumstances, this would have triggered an immediate rescue operation. But the storm had made helicopter operations impossible, and ground vehicles couldn't navigate the treacherous mountain roads in these conditions. The weather report Marcus had received the previous evening suggested the storm would begin to clear by mid-morning, with winds dropping below 30 miles per hour and visibility improving to at least a quarter mile. Those conditions would still be challenging for helicopter operations, but they might be manageable for an experienced crew with the right equipment. Through his scope, Marcus noticed something that made him focus more intently on one section of the main building. A slight discoloration in the snow near what appeared to be a ground-level window suggested that someone might have briefly opened it during the night. The disturbance was subtle, easily missed by a casual observer, but clearly visible to someone trained to spot such details. The observation gave Marcus hope that the SEAL team was not only alive, but still maintaining operational security. Opening a window briefly to assess conditions or create ventilation showed the kind of calculated risk-taking that suggested clear thinking and good leadership. It meant they weren't panicking or making desperate decisions that might compromise their safety. Marcus adjusted his radio headset and attempted to establish contact with his command post, hoping the improved weather conditions might allow better communication. Static filled his earpiece for several seconds before a faint voice broke through the interference. Overwatch 7, this is Base Command. Do you copy? The voice was barely audible through the atmospheric disturbance, but it was the first contact Marcus had been able to establish since the storm began. He pressed his transmit button and spoke carefully into his headset microphone. Base Command, this is Overwatch 7. I copy you weak, but readable. No visual contact with Bravo 6, but I have observations suggesting they may be sheltering in the main building. Weather conditions improving slightly, but still dangerous for air operations. The response took nearly a minute to arrive, punctuated by bursts of static that made some words impossible to understand. Overwatch 7, weather report shows, clearing by noon, extraction helicopter, standing by, maintain, until further notice. The partial transmission told Marcus what he needed to know. Help was coming, but it would still be several hours before conditions allowed a rescue attempt. He would need to maintain his watch and be ready to provide support if the situation changed. As the morning progressed, Marcus began to notice more signs of activity around the mining camp. The improved visibility revealed details that had been hidden by the blowing snow during the storm. Tire tracks, now partially filled with snow, suggested that vehicles had been in the area recently. The tracks appeared to lead from the main access road to several of the outbuildings. The discovery of vehicle tracks added a new dimension of concern to Marcus's mission. The intelligence reports had indicated that the weapons trafficking operation was still active in the area, but the storm should have prevented any movement for at least the past day. The fact that vehicles had been present recently suggested that the traffickers might have been caught in the storm as well. Marcus carefully studied the tracks through his scope, trying to determine their age and direction. The patterns suggested at least 2 vehicles, possibly 3, had accessed the camp within the past few days. Some tracks led toward the storage buildings on the far side of the camp, while others seemed to circle the main building where the SEAL team was likely sheltering. The implications were troubling. If the weapons traffickers had been in the area when the storm hit, they might have sought shelter in the same abandoned buildings the SEAL team was using. The possibility of enemy forces in close proximity to the isolated SEALs created a tactical situation that required immediate attention. Marcus keyed his radio and attempted to reach his command post again, this time with urgent information that could affect the rescue operation. Base Command, this is Overwatch 7 with priority intelligence. I have visual confirmation of recent vehicle activity in the target area. Multiple tracks suggest possible hostile presence. Request immediate guidance on rules of engagement. The response came more clearly this time, as atmospheric conditions continued to improve with the slowly clearing weather. Overwatch 7, confirmed. Intelligence reports suggest trafficking cell may have been operating in area when storm hit. You are authorized to engage any hostile forces that threaten Bravo 6. Extraction helicopter ETA approximately 4 hours, weather permitting. 4 hours. Marcus calculated quickly, considering the various factors that could affect the timeline. Weather conditions would need to continue improving for helicopter operations to be safe. The landing zone would need to be cleared of snow, which might require the SEAL team to expose themselves to accomplish. And now there was the added complication of possible enemy forces in the immediate area. Marcus began a more systematic observation of the entire camp complex, looking for any signs of human presence that might indicate where the traffickers had taken shelter. The storage buildings on the far side of the camp seemed the most likely candidates, as they would provide protection from the elements while keeping the occupants separated from the main building. Through his scope, Marcus studied each structure carefully, looking for the subtle signs that would reveal human habitation. A slight warmth signature that might show up as discolored snow, disturbed areas around doorways, or any movement in the windows. Professional snipers were trained to be patient observers, capable of detecting the smallest anomalies that might reveal important tactical information. After an hour of careful observation, Marcus spotted what he had been looking for. A thin wisp of steam, barely visible against the gray morning sky, rising from the roof area of one of the storage buildings. Someone was inside that building, generating enough heat to create condensation that escaped through gaps in the roof structure. The discovery confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The weapons trafficking cell was indeed present at the mining camp, sheltering from the storm in buildings adjacent to where the SEAL team was hiding. The two groups were separated by less than 200 yards of open ground, close enough that any careless noise or movement could reveal the presence of the other. Marcus understood the tactical situation with crystal clarity. The SEAL team was outnumbered and, in an exposed position, unable to move to better cover because of the weather conditions. The traffickers were armed and dangerous, with no reason to show mercy to federal agents who had stumbled into their operation. When the storm cleared enough for extraction operations to begin, both groups would become aware of each other's presence. The sniper's training and experience told him that action would be required. He couldn't wait passively for the situation to develop when he had the ability to influence the outcome. From his elevated position on the mountainside, Marcus commanded the entire camp area with his precision rifle. He could provide overwatch and protection for the SEAL team, engaging any threats that emerged from the storage buildings. The weather continued to clear throughout the morning, and by 11:30 the wind had dropped to manageable levels while visibility improved to nearly half a mile. Marcus Kane maintained his vigilant watch through the rifle scope, dividing his attention between the main building where the SEAL team was sheltering and the storage building where he had detected signs of the weapons trafficking cell. The improved conditions revealed more details about the camp that had been hidden during the worst of the storm. Marcus could now see that the storage building showing signs of occupancy was actually connected to two smaller structures by covered walkways that were partially collapsed but still provided some protection from the elements. This meant the trafficking group potentially had access to multiple positions, making them more difficult to track and engage if necessary. Through his radio headset, Marcus heard the distinctive sound of rotor blades in the distance. The extraction helicopter was approaching, still several miles away, but getting closer. The pilot would need to assess the landing zone conditions and determine whether it was safe to attempt a pickup in the current weather. Marcus keyed his radio with an update for both the helicopter crew and his command post. Base Command and Extraction 6. This is Overwatch 7. Weather conditions at target site are marginal but improving. Visibility approximately half-mile with winds 15 to 20 knots. Confirmed hostile presence in storage building complex on the south side of camp. Recommend approach from the north to avoid potential ground fire. The helicopter pilot's voice came through clearly despite the noise of the aircraft's engines and rotor system. Overwatch 7. This is Extraction 6. Copy hostile presence. ETA to your position approximately 15 minutes. Can you provide precise location of friendlies for pickup coordination? Marcus studied the main building through his scope, looking for any way to signal the SEAL team about the approaching extraction without alerting the traffickers to their presence. The building had several windows facing his direction, but all appeared to be either boarded up or blocked by snow accumulation. Extraction 6. Friendlies are believed to be in the main building, two-story structure in center of camp complex. No visual confirmation of their exact position within the building. Hostiles are in storage complex approximately 200 yards south of main building. I can provide precision fire support if necessary. As if responding to Marcus's transmission, a small section of snow suddenly fell away from one of the second-floor windows of the main building. Through his scope, Marcus could see a brief flash of movement inside before the opening was quickly obscured again. The SEAL team had heard the helicopter approaching and was preparing for extraction. But the same sound that alerted the SEALs also caught the attention of the trafficking cell. Marcus watched through his scope as a door to one of the storage buildings opened slightly, and he caught a glimpse of a figure peering out toward the sound of the approaching aircraft. The person was armed with what appeared to be an assault rifle and was clearly assessing the situation. Marcus centered his rifle's crosshairs on the partially open doorway and prepared for the possibility that he would need to engage. His finger moved to the trigger guard, ready to shift to the trigger itself if the armed figure made any threatening movement toward the main building or showed signs of preparing to fire at the incoming helicopter. The sound of the helicopter grew louder as it approached the camp area. Through his scope, Marcus could see more movement in the storage building complex as multiple individuals prepared for whatever was about to happen. He counted at least 3 separate figures moving between the buildings, all carrying weapons. The SEAL team was also reacting to the approaching extraction. Marcus observed more activity in the main building as snow was cleared from what appeared to be a back entrance facing away from the storage buildings. The team was positioning themselves for a rapid movement to the landing zone while staying out of sight of the hostile forces. Marcus established radio contact with the helicopter pilot to coordinate the extraction and provide real-time intelligence about the tactical situation. Extraction 6. This is Overwatch 7. I count at least 3 armed hostiles in the storage complex. Weapons appear to be assault rifles. Friendlies are preparing for movement from the rear of the main building. Recommend you establish orbit at safe distance while I assess hostile intentions. The pilot's response was immediate and professional. Overwatch 7 understood. Establishing orbit at 1 mile distance. altitude 1,000 feet above target elevation, standing by for your assessment and pickup coordination. The helicopter's presence had clearly changed the dynamic at the mining camp. Through his scope, Marcus watched as the traffickers became more active, with armed figures moving between buildings and what appeared to be preparations for defensive positions. At the same time, he could see subtle signs of the SEAL team's preparation for extraction, including what looked like equipment being gathered near the rear entrance of the main building. The tension was building toward a confrontation that Marcus hoped to avoid but needed to be prepared to manage. His position on the mountainside gave him a significant tactical advantage, allowing him to observe and potentially engage targets throughout the camp complex. But once he fired his first shot, the situation would escalate rapidly. Marcus made a decision that reflected both his tactical training and his understanding of the mission priorities. He would attempt to establish communication with the SEAL team to coordinate their extraction while keeping the traffickers under observation. If the hostile forces made any move toward the main building or attempted to engage the extraction helicopter, he would immediately provide precision fire support. Using a specialized laser designator attached to his rifle scope, Marcus began sending coded light signals toward the rear windows of the main building. The flashing pattern was a standard military communication protocol that any Navy SEAL would recognize as coming from friendly forces. The message was simple: sniper in overwatch position, helicopter standing by. Prepare for extraction on your signal. Within minutes, Marcus saw a brief light flash from the rear window of the main building, acknowledging his communication. The SEAL team now knew they had precision fire support available and could coordinate their movement accordingly. Lieutenant Commander Morrison would be assessing the tactical situation and formulating a plan for getting his team to the landing zone safely. With hostile forces in the immediate area, the extraction would require careful timing and coordination to avoid a firefight that could endanger both the SEALs and the helicopter crew. Through his scope, Marcus continued to monitor the storage building complex, where the level of activity was increasing. He could see armed figures moving between buildings and what appeared to be weapons being positioned at windows and doorways. The traffickers were preparing for a confrontation, though it wasn't clear whether they intended to engage the helicopter, search for the source of the extraction attempt, or simply defend their position. Marcus keyed his radio to provide an updated intelligence assessment to both the helicopter crew and his command post. Base Command and Extraction 6. Hostile forces are taking up defensive positions but have not yet shown direct aggressive intent toward the extraction. Friendlies have acknowledged Overwatch support and are prepared for movement. Request permission to engage if hostiles threaten extraction operation. The response from Command was immediate and clear. Overwatch 7. You are authorized to engage any hostile forces that threaten the extraction operation or friendly forces. Rules of engagement are weapons-free if you determine imminent threat exists. With authorization to engage confirmed, Marcus began identifying primary and secondary targets among the hostile forces. Through his scope, he could see at least 4 individuals with weapons, positioned in 3 different buildings. The range to the closest targets was approximately 800 yards, well within his effective engagement distance even in the challenging weather conditions. Marcus prioritized his targets based on the threat they posed to the extraction operation. The armed figure positioned at the main entrance to the storage complex had the best field of fire toward the landing zone, and would be his first target if engagement became necessary. 2 other individuals who had positioned themselves at windows overlooking the approach route to the landing zone would be secondary targets. The helicopter pilot's voice came through Marcus's headset again, indicating that preparations for the actual extraction were about to begin. Overwatch 7. This is Extraction 6. We're ready to begin approach for pickup. Can you confirm landing zone is clear and safe for approach? Marcus made a final assessment of the tactical situation before responding. The weather had continued to improve, with winds now below 15 knots and visibility approaching 3/4 of a mile. The landing zone, located in a relatively flat area between the main building and the access road, appeared clear of obstacles and provided good approach and departure routes. Extraction 6. Landing zone appears clear. Weather conditions acceptable for landing. Hostile forces are in defensive positions but have not yet engaged. I have multiple targets identified and am prepared to provide fire support. Recommend approach from the northwest to minimize exposure to hostile positions. As the helicopter began its approach, Marcus could see increased activity from both groups in the camp. The SEAL team was making final preparations for their movement to the landing zone, while the traffickers were clearly reacting to the approaching aircraft with what appeared to be growing alarm and agitation. Through his scope, Marcus watched as one of the armed figures in the S2, the crack of Marcus Kane's rifle shot echoed across the frozen valley like thunder, instantly transforming the tense standoff into active combat. Through his scope, Marcus watched as his precisely placed bullet found its target, neutralizing the armed trafficker who had been preparing to engage the incoming extraction helicopter. The threat was eliminated, but Marcus knew the fight was just beginning. The remaining traffickers immediately reacted to the sniper fire, seeking cover while trying to locate the source of the deadly accurate shooting. Marcus could see armed figures scrambling between buildings, their movements panicked but still coordinated enough to suggest they were experienced in combat situations. The helicopter pilot's voice came through Marcus's headset with professional calm despite the sudden escalation of the tactical situation. Overwatch 7, this is Extraction 6. We heard rifle fire. What's your status? Marcus worked the bolt of his rifle smoothly, chambering another round while maintaining visual contact with the target area through his scope. Extraction 6, one hostile down. Engaging additional threats as they present themselves. Continue approach, but be prepared for defensive maneuvering if necessary. Friendlies are still in the main building awaiting pickup. From his elevated position, Marcus had a commanding view of the entire camp complex. He could see the SEAL team preparing for their dash to the landing zone, while the remaining traffickers were trying to establish firing positions that would allow them to engage both the helicopter and any movement from the main building. A second armed figure appeared at a window in the storage complex, this one carrying what appeared to be a light machine gun capable of bringing down the approaching helicopter. Marcus shifted his aim smoothly, leading the target slightly as the person moved behind the window frame. The second shot from Marcus's rifle was as precise as the first, the .338 Lapua Magnum bullet, finding its mark despite the challenging angle and the target's partial concealment. The immediate threat to the helicopter was eliminated, but Marcus could see more movement in the buildings as the remaining traffickers adapted to the sniper threat. Through his scope, Marcus observed the rear door of the main building opening slowly. Lieutenant Commander Morrison appeared first, using military hand signals to coordinate his team's movement. The SEAL team had waited for the sniper engagement to provide them with covering fire before beginning their extraction. Marcus keyed his radio to coordinate with the SEAL team leader and the helicopter crew simultaneously. Bravo 6 and Extraction 6, this is Overwatch 7. I have eliminated 2 immediate threats, but count at least 2 additional hostiles in the storage complex. Bravo 6, you have covering fire for movement to the landing zone. Extraction 6, maintain current approach, but be advised of possible ground fire from the south. The helicopter was now clearly visible as it approached the landing zone, flying low and fast to minimize its exposure to potential ground fire. The pilot was demonstrating the kind of skill and courage that made military aviation crews legendary, continuing the mission despite the active combat situation below. Marcus watched through his scope as the 4-man SEAL team began their coordinated movement from the main building toward the landing zone. Lieutenant Commander Morrison led the way, with his team members following in tactical formation that provided mutual support while minimizing their exposure to hostile fire. The remaining traffickers were clearly aware of the SEAL team's movement and were attempting to engage them from concealed positions in the storage buildings. Marcus could see muzzle flashes from at least 2 locations as automatic weapons fire erupted from the hostile positions. The SEAL team immediately responded to the incoming fire with the tactical proficiency that made them elite warriors. They sought cover behind abandoned mining equipment while returning precise fire toward the hostile positions. But their priority was reaching the landing zone, not engaging in a prolonged firefight. Marcus identified the source of the automatic weapons fire and prepared to engage the third hostile target. The range was slightly greater than his previous shots, approximately 850 yards, and the target was using a defensive position that provided significant cover. The sniper's training taught him to wait for the optimal shot rather than rushing and potentially missing a critical target. Marcus controlled his breathing and waited for the hostile fighter to expose enough of his position to ensure a successful engagement. The opportunity came when the trafficker shifted position to get a better angle on the moving SEAL team. Marcus's crosshairs found their mark, and his third shot of the engagement eliminated another immediate threat to the extraction operation. The helicopter was now approaching its final descent to the landing zone, with the pilot demonstrating exceptional skill in maintaining control despite the swirling snow kicked up by the rotor wash and the occasional incoming ground fire from the remaining hostile positions. Marcus continued to provide overwatch as the SEAL team reached the perimeter of the landing zone. Through his scope, he could see that Petty Officer Walsh, the team medic, was limping slightly, possibly wounded by debris or a near miss from the hostile fire. But all 4 team members were mobile and moving toward the extraction point. The final armed trafficker was proving more elusive than his companions, using the complex layout of the storage buildings to avoid Marcus's precision fire while continuing to engage the extraction operation. Marcus could see muzzle flashes from different windows as the hostile fighter moved between positions. The helicopter touched down in the landing zone with rotor blades still turning, ready for immediate departure once the SEAL team was aboard. The crew chief was visible at the side door, providing covering fire with a mounted machine gun while scanning for additional threats. Lieutenant Commander Morrison reached the helicopter first, followed closely by his 3 team members. Marcus watched through his scope as they boarded the aircraft with the speed and efficiency of professionals who had practiced this maneuver countless times. But the remaining trafficker wasn't giving up. Marcus could see him preparing for what appeared to be a desperate attempt to damage the helicopter before it could take off. The hostile fighter was positioning what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, capable of destroying the aircraft if he could achieve a successful hit. Marcus realized he had one chance to prevent a catastrophic attack on the extraction helicopter. The angle was difficult, the range was at the maximum of his effective capability, and the target was partially concealed behind cover that would deflect anything but a perfectly placed shot. Everything Marcus had learned in 12 years of military service and countless hours of training came together in that moment. His breathing slowed to almost nothing, his heartbeat seemed to pause, and his world narrowed to the precise relationship between his rifle's crosshairs and the deadly threat 890 yards away. The fourth and final shot of the engagement was the most important of Marcus's career. Through his scope, he watched as the .338 Lapua Magnum bullet found its target with surgical precision, eliminating the RPG threat just as the hostile fighter was preparing to fire. The helicopter lifted off immediately, carrying the 4-man SEAL team to safety. Marcus watched through his scope as the aircraft gained altitude and speed, putting distance between itself and any remaining threats on the ground. Marcus's radio crackled with multiple transmissions as the successful extraction was confirmed by various elements of the operation. Overwatch 7. This is Extraction 6. Package secure, all personnel aboard and accounted for. Outstanding shooting, Navy. We're clear of the target area and proceeding to base. Overwatch 7. This is Bravo 6 actual. Thanks for the cover, brother. Your marksmanship just saved 4 lives. See you back at base. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him as he confirmed that the extraction had been successful. Through his scope, he continued to observe the camp area for several more minutes, ensuring that no additional threats remained active. The storage building complex appeared quiet now, with no further movement visible from his elevated position. The weather had continued to clear during the firefight, and Marcus could now see for nearly a mile in all directions. The storm that had trapped everyone at the mining camp was finally moving away, leaving behind a landscape of pristine snow broken only by the evidence of the morning's combat. Marcus began the process of preparing for his own extraction, carefully policing his brass casings and ensuring that his equipment was secure for movement. His mission was complete, but his professionalism demanded that he leave no trace of his presence on the mountainside. The 4 shots he had fired had been textbook examples of precision marksmanship under extreme conditions. Each engagement had been necessary to protect either the SEAL team or the extraction helicopter, and each had been executed with the kind of accuracy that separated elite snipers from ordinary marksmen. As Marcus prepared to leave his position, he reflected on the events of the sound of rotor blades grew steadily louder as Marcus Kane's extraction helicopter approached his position on the mountainside. The weather had continued to clear throughout the afternoon, with visibility now extending several miles and winds dropping to nearly calm conditions. The storm that had created the crisis was finally moving away from the Alaska range, leaving behind a landscape of stunning beauty and dangerous cold. Marcus stood at the designated pickup point, a small clearing about half a mile from his sniper's nest, with his equipment properly secured and ready for immediate departure. His rifle was broken down and stowed in its protective case, his ammunition counted and accounted for, and his observation notes prepared for the mission debrief that would follow. The extraction helicopter was a different aircraft than the one that had rescued the SEAL team. This one configured specifically for personnel recovery in extreme weather conditions. The crew included a flight medic, though Marcus had reported no injuries during his radio communications with the command post. As the helicopter flared for landing, Marcus could see the professional competence of the crew in their smooth coordination and careful attention to the challenging mountain landing zone. The pilot set the aircraft down gently despite the thin air and unpredictable wind currents that made high-altitude operations particularly demanding. Marcus boarded the helicopter quickly and efficiently, his movements reflecting the same professionalism that had characterized his entire mission. As the aircraft lifted off and began the flight back to base, he settled into his seat and began the mental process of transitioning from combat operations to post-mission procedures. Through the helicopter's windows, Marcus could see the mining camp growing smaller below them. From this aerial perspective, the scene of the morning's firefight looked peaceful and uninhabited, with no obvious signs of the dramatic events that had unfolded just hours earlier. The snow had already begun to cover the evidence of human activity, returning the wilderness to its natural state. The flight back to base would take approximately 45 minutes, giving Marcus time to organize his thoughts and prepare for the detailed debriefing that would be required. Military protocol demanded thorough documentation of any engagement involving lethal force, particularly when multiple hostile casualties were involved. As the helicopter flew south toward the military installation, Marcus reviewed the events of the mission in his mind, analyzing each decision and action to identify lessons learned and areas for improvement. Professional snipers were taught to be constantly self-critical, always seeking ways to enhance their effectiveness and reduce risks to the personnel they supported. The 4 shots Marcus had fired during the extraction operation represented textbook examples of precision marksmanship under extreme conditions. Each engagement had been necessary and justified, with clear threats to friendly forces requiring immediate neutralization. The range and accuracy of the shots, combined with the challenging weather conditions and high-stress tactical situation, demonstrated the effectiveness of his training and experience. But Marcus knew that the technical aspects of marksmanship were only part of what had made the mission successful. The real key had been the coordination between multiple elements: the sniper providing overwatch, the SEAL team maintaining operational security while preparing for extraction, the helicopter crew executing a dangerous rescue in marginal weather conditions, and the command post managing the overall operation. The radio in Marcus's headset crackled with a transmission from the command post, confirming that all elements of the operation had returned safely to base. All stations, this is Base Command. Operation Frozen Guardian is complete. All personnel accounted for and returning to base. Medical evaluation will be conducted for all participants upon arrival. Well done to all involved. Marcus felt a sense of satisfaction at hearing the operation designated as complete and successful. Operation Frozen Guardian would become part of the official record, documenting how military professionalism and coordinated teamwork had overcome extreme weather conditions and hostile action to save the lives of 4 Navy SEALs. As the helicopter continued its flight toward base, Marcus thought about the families of the SEAL team members who would be welcoming their loved ones home for Christmas. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's wife and children would have their husband and father back safely. Petty Officer Rodriguez would be able to continue planning his spring wedding. The small sacrifices and risks taken by military personnel often went unnoticed by the general public, but they made possible the freedom and security that allowed families to gather for the holidays. Marcus had joined the military partly because of his family's tradition of service, but over the years his motivation had evolved into something deeper. He had come to understand that military service was about more than patriotic duty or professional achievement. It was about the bonds formed between warriors who trusted each other with their lives, and the responsibility to ensure that everyone came home safely. The mining camp incident had reinforced those beliefs in the most direct way possible. For highly trained Navy SEALs, among the most capable warriors in the world, had found themselves in a situation where survival depended on the support of others. Marcus had been in position to provide that support, and his training had enabled him to do so effectively. The helicopter was approaching the military base now, with the familiar sight of runways, hangars, and support buildings becoming visible through the forward windows. Marcus could see the debriefing facility where he would spend the next several hours providing detailed accounts of everything he had observed during the mission. As the aircraft touched down at the base, Marcus gathered his equipment and prepared to disembark. The mission was officially over, but the process of documenting and analyzing the operation would continue for several more days. Intelligence analysts would review his observations and photographs. Ballistics experts would examine his rifle and ammunition, and tactical specialists would study the engagement sequences to identify best practices for future operations. Marcus was met at the helicopter by personnel from the command post, including the operations officer who had coordinated the overall mission. The initial greeting was brief and professional, focused on confirming that Marcus was uninjured and ready to proceed with the debriefing process. The debriefing facility was located in a secure section of the base, designed specifically for the sensitive discussions that followed special operations missions. Marcus was escorted to a conference room equipped with maps, communication equipment, and recording devices that would capture every detail of his report. The debriefing team included representatives from multiple disciplines: intelligence analysis, tactical operations, marksmanship instruction, and legal review. Each would have specific questions related to their area of expertise, but all were interested in understanding exactly what had occurred during the mission and how similar operations might be improved in the future. Marcus began his report with a chronological account of the mission, starting with his insertion and establishment of the observation post. He described the weather conditions, the layout of the mining camp, and his initial observations of both the SEAL team's shelter and the signs of hostile presence. The intelligence analysts were particularly interested in Marcus's observations of the weapons trafficking operation, including the vehicle tracks he had discovered and the evidence of recent activity at the camp. His detailed descriptions would help build a more complete picture of the criminal organization's operations in the region. The tactical specialists focused on the combat engagement, analyzing each shot Marcus had fired and the decision-making process that led to the use of lethal force. They were interested in understanding how the tactical situation had developed and whether alternative approaches might have been possible. The marksmanship instructors wanted to review the technical aspects of the long-range shooting, including the environmental conditions, equipment performance, and accuracy achieved. Marcus's engagement at ranges approaching 900 yards in challenging weather conditions would become a case study for future sniper training programs. After several hours of detailed questioning and discussion, Marcus was released to begin the administrative process of returning from the mission. His equipment would be inspected and cleaned, his rifle would be re-zeroed to ensure accuracy for future operations, and his personal gear would be prepared for the next assignment. But first, Marcus had earned some time off. The command post had arranged for 3 days of administrative leave, recognizing that the stress and isolation of the mission required some recovery time. He would be able to travel home to California and spend Christmas with his family, just as the SEAL team members were doing with their loved ones. As Marcus prepared to leave the base, he received word that the SEAL team wanted to meet with him before departing for their own holiday leave. The meeting was arranged in one of the base's informal gathering areas, away from the official atmosphere of the debriefing facilities. Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached Marcus first, extending his hand in greeting and speaking with the genuine appreciation of a leader who understood what had made the difference between mission success and potential catastrophe. "Marcus, I wanted to thank you personally for what you did up there. Your overwatch and covering fire saved our lives. Plain and simple. We were sitting ducks in that storm, and when those traffickers showed up, we would have been caught in a crossfire without your support." The other 3 SEAL team members echoed their leader's sentiments, each offering their own thanks for Marcus's professionalism and accuracy during the critical moments of the extraction. Petty Officer Walsh, who had been slightly wounded during the firefight, reported that his injury was minor and would not require any extended medical treatment. The conversation among the warriors was relaxed but meaningful, reflecting the bonds formed between military personnel who have shared dangerous experiences together. They discussed the technical aspects of the operation, the challenges posed by the weather conditions, and their mutual respect for the training and dedication that had made the mission successful. As the group prepared to part ways for the holiday period, Lieutenant Commander Morrison made a point of emphasizing how the successful outcome of Operation Frozen Guardian exemplified the best traditions of military service. "What happened up there shows why we do this job, and why the training matters so much. When everything goes wrong and lives are on the line, we can count on each other to do whatever it takes to bring everyone home. That's what makes us more than just individual warriors. It makes us a team." Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he prepared to leave for his own holiday travel. The mission had tested every aspect of his skills and dedication as a Navy sniper, and he had met the challenge successfully. For fellow warriors were going home to their families for Christmas because of his precision marksmanship and tactical judgment. As Marcus boarded the commercial flight that would take him home to California, he reflected on the events of the past few days and what they meant for his continued service in the Navy. The extreme conditions and high-stakes tactical situation had reminded him why he had chosen the demanding path of a military sniper. The frozen wilderness of Alaska had provided the backdrop for a mission that demonstrated the importance of precision, professionalism, and the determination to leave no one behind. As his aircraft lifted off and headed south toward the warmer climates of the continental United States, Marcus knew that Operation Frozen Guardian would remain one of the defining experiences of his military career. In a few hours, he would be reunited with his own family for Christmas, carrying with him the satisfaction of a mission accomplished and the knowledge that 4 other families would be complete for the holidays because of his service. It was the kind of outcome that made all the sacrifices and challenges of military life worthwhile. The past 24 hours. A routine Overwatch mission had become a life-or-death rescue operation, testing every aspect of his training and experience. The extreme weather conditions, the isolation, and the pressure of knowing that 4 lives depended on his actions had created one of the most challenging scenarios of his military career. But the mission had been successful. 4 Navy SEALs were heading home to their families for Christmas, alive and safe because of the precision fire support Marcus had provided from his mountainside position. It was the kind of mission that reminded him why he had chosen to serve his country as a sniper, using his skills to protect fellow warriors in their most vulnerable moments. Marcus shouldered his rifle and began the careful descent from his observation post, knowing that his own extraction helicopter would be arriving within the hour. The frozen Alaskan wilderness had tested everyone involved in the operation, but military training, professional skill, and the determination to leave no one behind had prevailed. The mining camp below was quiet now, its abandoned buildings returning to the silence of the wilderness. But for a few hours on a December morning, it had been the scene of a precision rescue operation that demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated military teamwork in the most challenging conditions imaginable. As Marcus made his way down the mountainside, he could already hear the distant sound of his extraction helicopter approaching through the clearing skies. Soon he would be reunited with the SEAL team he had protected, and they would all be heading home for Christmas, their mission complete, and their brotherhood strengthened by the shared experience of surviving together in the frozen wilderness of Alaska. Rage Complex moved to a window position that provided a clear line of sight toward the approaching helicopter. The individual was raising what appeared to be an assault rifle, potentially preparing to engage the aircraft. Marcus's training and experience kicked in automatically. His breathing slowed, his finger moved to the trigger, and his rifle's crosshairs centered on the armed figure who posed an immediate threat to the extraction operation. The range was 760 yards, with a slight crosswind from the left that would require a minimal adjustment to his point of aim. The moment of decision had arrived. Marcus could see through his scope that the armed trafficker was preparing to fire at the incoming helicopter, endangering both the aircraft crew and the SEAL team's extraction. There was no time for warnings or attempts at de-escalation. Marcus took a deep breath, exhaled half of it, and gently squeezed the trigger of his .338 Lapua Magnum rifle. The precision shot would mark the beginning of a firefight that would determine whether 4 Navy SEALs made it home for Christmas or became casualties in the frozen Alaskan wilderness. The sound of the rifle shot echoed across the mountainside as Marcus's bullet found its target, beginning a sequence of events that would test every aspect of his training as a Navy sniper and his dedication to protecting his fellow warriors. But engaging targets would also reveal his position and potentially compromise the entire rescue operation. Once he fired his first shot, everyone in the camp would know a sniper was present. The traffickers might retreat deeper into the buildings, making them harder to target. They might also decide to search the surrounding area for threats, potentially discovering and attacking his position. Marcus weighed his options carefully, considering every aspect of the developing tactical situation. The lives of 4 Navy SEALs hung in the balance, and his decisions in the next few hours would determine whether they returned home safely for Christmas or became casualties of an operation that had gone terribly wrong. Through his scope, Marcus continued to monitor both the main building where the SEALs were sheltering and the storage building where the traffickers had taken refuge. The weather was continuing to clear, which meant visibility was improving for everyone in the camp area. Soon, the two groups would inevitably become aware of each other's presence. The next few hours would test every aspect of Marcus's training and experience as a Navy sniper. He would need to remain hidden while maintaining constant observation, be ready to engage multiple targets if necessary, and coordinate with the incoming rescue helicopter to ensure a successful extraction. As Marcus settled in for the most challenging phase of his mission, he checked his rifle one more time and prepared for whatever the clearing weather might reveal. The storm that had trapped everyone in the mining camp was finally beginning to weaken, but the real danger was just beginning. Through his scope, Marcus continued to monitor the mining camp, looking for any signs of life from the SEAL team or potential threats from the weapons traffickers. The storm continued to rage, but he thought he detected a slight lessening in the wind intensity. Perhaps the worst was beginning to pass. As night approached, Marcus prepared for what would be the most challenging part of his mission. Maintaining observation in complete darkness, in sub-zero temperatures, while staying alert for any developments that might require immediate action. He checked his night vision equipment, verified his radio frequencies one more time, and settled in for a long, cold night of watching and waiting. The lives of 4 Navy SEALs depended on his ability to stay awake, stay alert, and be ready to provide precision fire support if the situation demanded it. In the frozen wilderness of Alaska, Marcus Kane was their guardian angel, watching over them from his mountain perch as Christmas approached and the storm raged on. The wind continued to howl through the mountains, carrying with it the sounds of a wilderness that showed no mercy to those unprepared for its harsh embrace. But it also carried something else, the determination of warriors who would not abandon their brothers, no matter what nature threw at them. Marcus adjusted his scope one more time and continued his vigil, knowing that somewhere in the buildings below, men were counting on him to keep them safe until help could arrive. The storm would end eventually, the extraction helicopter would return,